Hello, beautiful souls. My name is Jessie, and welcome back to another episode of Rewire to Inspire. This show where we'll dive into self-love, learn tangible ways to rewire the brain, and discovering your soul's purpose. The goal of Rewire to Inspire is to encourage listeners to begin doing the hard work, to get curious and open to maximizing your life. Our mindset shapes how we live. Depending on life events, traumas, and personal experiences, our mindsets are all vastly different. However, one thing we all have in common is the ability to rewire our mind, to change the narrative, and to pivot our lives. I hope you leave each episode with the belief that you are so worthy to live a life true to you. I look forward to chatting with you every single Tuesday and Thursday and helping you grow exponentially in all areas of your life. Without further ado, here's today's episode. Hello, you guys, and welcome back to my podcast, Rewire to Inspire. I'm your host, Jessie Brown, and I am thrilled to be jumping on the mic with you all for episode number 80. We've made it to number 80. Of course we did, but it's just amazing. And thank you guys so much for sticking with me throughout the last year, over a year now, I guess, and for just tuning back in and spreading the word. I was at a craft show yesterday and I had a couple of you come up to me and say, I've listened to your show before and I just enjoy it and you're so positive and it's exactly what I needed to hear. And just all these really amazing, beautiful pieces of feedback that I honestly sometimes don't know how to respond because I'm like, is this really real life? Like, am I actually making an impact in which I hope that I am? And it just always fills my cup so much. So thank you guys so much for sticking with me all the way to episode 80. I continue to just enjoy this journey each and every day that passes even more. So here we go. Here's to another 80 episodes. I'm so excited. And today's episode is one that I mentioned in Tuesday's episode where I chatted all about checking in on our mental health and tips for our mental health. And I wanted to piggyback that off of that furthermore and talk about our window of tolerance. And our window of tolerance is something that I've talked about before on my podcast. It was one of my first episodes I ever recorded because it's something that is so important and vital to know, and a tool that I did not learn until I was 20 because I had just started my job at a sexual assault healing center. And as I was going through this job, one major thing that they encouraged me to teach my clients was about our window of tolerance. And so I got so curious about what is this window of tolerance and how do I make sure I'm in my window and how do we know what our triggers are and what does it mean to be out of our window of tolerance? And so I'm so excited to dive into that with you all. So without further ado, let's dive into episode number 80. So the window of tolerance is basically an ideal zone in which you feel like when you're faced with stressful situations or harder situations, stressful situations, you're able to cope with them in a calm and centered and engaged manner without feeling overwhelmed by them. And you're able to process your emotions with a rational mind. And so this was a framework that was created by Dr. Daniel Siegel. So I definitely have to make sure I give credit where credit is due. And I really think that this window gives a really great visual demonstration. And I actually have the visual right here in front of me. If you are watching on video, I keep this close to my desk all the time so that I can ask myself where I am in my window of tolerance. How am I feeling? What am I needing? Because when we're out of our window of tolerance, which is what I'm going to get into today, it's likely that we're in a state of not being in our body and being grounded. And so it's so important that we know where we're at in our window of tolerance. And so some signs that you're actually in your window of tolerance, if you're wondering, is that you're able to maintain your personal boundaries and not feel exploited by your circumstances if you're dealing with something stressful. Your reaction to the stressor or thing that is happening is appropriate for the situation. You feel safe, you feel grounded, you feel present. Oftentimes when we're not in our window of tolerance, we are not present because our mind has ripped that plug between our thinking brain and our logic brain. And so we're really just acting out of impulse. And so a sign that you're in your window of tolerance is that you feel present instead of going to the past or to the future. And the thing about our window of tolerance is they can vary in sizes. We can have a really big window of tolerance or a super small window of tolerance, or in very, very severe cases, really not have much window of tolerance, meaning we're basically just bouncing back and forth between different states of stress response, which is our fight, flight, and freeze. And so that typically happens after we undergo a traumatic event is our body is so just overwhelmed with everything that it disconnects us. And so that causes us to just constantly be in a fight or flight state. And so it's just I just want to normalize that our window of tolerance between all of us is all completely different based off of our experiences. And we can go in two different directions out of our window of tolerance. So we can go up out of our window of tolerance, which is called hyperarousal, and we can go down out of our window of tolerance, which is called hypoarousal. And so I'm going to break down what those are for you guys. So a hyperarousal state is basically, I want you to think of your body being in like an erupting volcano. You are in a state of fight. You want to, run away. It can often feel really, really overwhelming. And again, I just want to normalize that we don't actually choose which direction we go. So when we're out of our window of tolerance, our body and our mind decides for us which direction we're going to go. And so I always just like to give that piece, because oftentimes when we respond a certain way, we're often beating ourselves up of, well, why did I respond that way? And why didn't I do this? And why didn't I say that? And the reason being is because you literally did not have the capability to do that. Your mind and your body chose for you. And so hyperarousal, you will likely be feeling anxious, angry, stressed out of control, overwhelmed, unsafe, act on impulses, become very defensive, snappy, like saying things you don't mean, just very like to the point and just aggressive, right? And so we're very much, again, the visual on the picture is a volcano about to explode. We are just feeling all these emotions and we're just so wired up. And I think we all know what our go-to is. Oftentimes, if we typically go to hyper or to hypo, we often have one or the other that we typically go to. Although again, we don't choose and we can go through both. We typically have one that we go to over the other. Hypoarousal is basically when your nervous system is still activated, but you're in an active state of freeze. And so this is basically when you begin to shut down and or withdraw. You can start to feel numb. You can feel dissociative. You can feel zoned out, frozen, disconnected from the situation, from people, from yourself. You can basically, I've heard a lot of people explain it, and I've experienced this as well. You almost feel like you're watching yourself, like in third person, almost like you're watching a movie. You're just kind of disconnected from the situation. Your body has pulled the ripcord. And the thing that happens with dissociation, which I'm going to get into a little bit later, is that we're really not in our body. Our mind has pulled that cord because it's identified it as not being safe. And if it's not safe, it doesn't want us to be there. So it'll kind of take us away from that. And so that is hypoarousal. And so we all have a window of tolerance, just like mental health. We all have mental health. We all have a window of tolerance. The thing is, though, is that it can range in size depending on your personal circumstances, depending on traumas, depending on your experiences, things you've gone through, your childhood experiences of how well you are at managing your emotions and managing stress. If you've been taught how to regulate those things, or maybe you haven't, our window of tolerances are all completely different. But the thing that's beautiful is that we all have the ability and capability to widen and grow our window of tolerance a little bit more, which is kind of amazing. And so some things that can affect more severely your window of tolerance, like things that can right off the get-go make it be a smaller window of tolerance, is negative childhood experiences. So any kind of childhood experiences that have caused you to go into a state of overdrive or into a traumatic state can lessen, and I don't like that word lessen, can slim your window of tolerance. And the second one, your family of origin. So if you were born into a family who maybe all of their window of tolerances were also very small, they also didn't have great coping strategies or go-tos or ways to regulate their emotions, that was likely passed on to you. And so likely right off the get-go, you were born and brought into this world with a smaller window of tolerance. Number 3, which is one that is huge, is any traumatic experiences. Anytime our mind undergoes a big T trauma, our body feels unsafe, right? And so when that happens, our window of tolerance basically becomes non-existent because it's not safe to be in a place that is traumatic, or it wouldn't be traumatic in the first place. Because the definition of trauma is anything that overwhelms one's ability to cope. And if we're not able to cope, that means we're not able to be present, and therefore our window of tolerance doesn't have to be present. And so we're operating out of a state of a stress response, which is our fight, flight, and freeze, aka hypoarousal. The fourth thing that can more severely affect our window of tolerance is any other psychiatric disorder. So borderline personality disorder, PTSD, anything like that can really begin to decrease our window of tolerance and make it smaller. So PTSD specifically can make you feel more triggered. It can be easier for you to fall out of your window of tolerance. Trauma causes us to likely go into hyperarousal and feel numb, dissociative. So I know this feeling all too well of feeling like when things around me are just so overwhelming, I'll just fall into a state of hypoarousal. I'll feel helpless. I'll feel numb. I'll feel dissociative. I'm not in my body. Nothing feels safe. It even gets so extreme sometimes in which I can't even hear people talking. I'll just hear like a buzzing sound in my ear. And that's because I'm just so disconnected. And so I really want to make sure that I share on what dissociation is and what a dissociative state is. And so it's basically when you become disconnected from your environment. So I have an example that I always like to use with my clients when I'm trying to make this word land is, have you ever been driving somewhere, like driving to work or driving to a familiar place, and you kind of just get there and you're like, whoa, how did I get to my destination? That is basically dissociation, because you know the path so well that your mind didn't even have to be logically thinking to get you there, which again can be a very dangerous thing. And that's why new drivers are actually less likely to get into an accident, because they're so hyper aware of everything around them. Whereas once you've been driving for a while, you kind of just become nonchalant. You blast the music, you get the windows down, whatever, you feel confident. And it's typically at those times that we begin to feel safe that accidents can actually happen. And so dissociation is there to protect us. It's there to keep us safe. But oftentimes it's actually doing the opposite of that, because we're not able to be in the present moment. And so the reason I wanted to share all this episode with you guys is it's important to know your window of tolerance and how big your window of tolerance is or how small it is, because it allows you to know when you're out of it. And when you're out of your window, you're able to bring awareness to that, because you're able to get to know your triggers. You're able to know things and tips and tricks to help you come back into your window of tolerance. But if we just don't bring awareness to it or talk about it or get to know ourselves of how we respond to things, we'll often continue to respond the same way over and over and over again. And so getting to know your go-to when you leave your window of tolerance, how wide your window of tolerance is, and constantly working often proactively to widen it is huge. We often wait until something traumatic happens or we're forced to bring awareness to it to work on these things. But if we're able to be proactive in broadening our window of tolerance, it's really only going to benefit us. And basically what that means is filling our backpack with tools and resources that help us feel safe to come back to our body. So some things that I'm going to leave you with for today, some things that you can do if you're in a hyperarousal state. So again, you're feeling anxious, angry, out of control, overwhelmed, lashing out, irrational, you're in a fight state. Things that you can do if you're hanging out up there is mindfulness exercises. So whether that's listening to like a visualization or taking deep breaths, deep breathing is another great one. So maybe doing like the 4-box breathing. So that's when you inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. And you basically visualize a box in your mind. So you're able to be mindful with your breathing. Journaling is a good one. Another one that I find super helpful personally when I'm up there is to go do a fire workout. Basically, when I think of being in hyperarousal, I think of a lot of energy going on in our body. And one of the best things that we can do is to allow some of that energy to get out in a healthy way. So maybe that's screaming super loud into a pillow. Maybe that's punching a pillow. Maybe that's going to the gym and lifting heavy weights. Maybe that's running up a super steep mountain. It's getting some of that energy out of your body. If you're in a state of hypoarousal, some things that you can do, and I know that these can be hard sometimes, especially if we are disconnected, and this one does typically take a little bit longer to come out of, but grounding exercises while honoring your body are huge. So focusing on your 5 senses. So the 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste, kind of thing. So really just activating all of our senses, because our senses are the first thing that gets our thinking brain back online, which gets us back into our window of tolerance. So grounding exercises are huge when you're in a state of hyperarousal. hypoarousal. I keep messing those up. Hypoarousal. Physical activity, but this would be more in regards to yoga, stretching, going for a walk, kind of just being gentle dancing, gentle moving, really just slowly moving and getting some flow back into your body. And the last one is creative exercises. So I've been doing a lot of digging in this area of how good creativity is for your mind. And creativity is so mentally stimulating. It's actually insane. And even more specifically, doing things like mandalas, so those coloring pages that are like very geometric and just like perfectly line up and are just beautiful. Our mind loves that so much, and completing that more so than just like coloring on a piece of paper. So I definitely encourage you, if you are someone that's creative or wants to use creativity to help yourself, mandalas are such a really good, useful tool. They can be printed out very easily off of Google. I know you can go get a whole book from the dollar store for a couple of dollars. Just a great thing that you can have. I like to keep one. I have one right here actually on the floor. It's a Blue's Clues one, which is super cute. Love that. And it just helps me when I'm feeling super overwhelmed. I have my pencil crayons and that right there. So if I'm ever on a meeting and I'm trying to stay present, or if I'm overwhelmed, I'll just color for a couple minutes and I'll find that my thinking brain comes back online and I just begin to feel more safe. So I truly hope you guys enjoyed today's episode on the window of tolerance. I wanted to share this because I think throughout the past couple of years, a lot of our window of tolerances have become very, very small, and a lot of us are feeling very depleted. And I want to bring awareness to that. We can widen it, and we can widen it through some of those things that I mentioned. And I also encourage you to maybe do your own research on your window of tolerance, get to know yourself better. One thing I like to do when I see my picture of my window of tolerance is I like to kind of visualize, where do I think I'm at right now? Am I in my window but slowly approaching a hypoarousal state? Am I kind of climbing towards the top and starting to feel anxious and angry and out of control and going into my hyper state? And if so, I have those tools and tips and tricks in which I can do and use to feel grounded. Because when we're in our window of tolerance, we're able to make rational decisions. We're able to deal with conflict better, deal with stress better, and honestly just allow our nervous system to relax and to rest and digest and to just do all its normal functions and things that it's supposed to do. Because if we're just constantly bouncing back and forth between different stress responses, our body is just constantly in a state of overdrive. So the more that we can get our system in the area of window of tolerance and in a state of homeostasis, that is honestly the goal. And we are going to ebb and flow. We are going to get hyper aroused and hypo aroused, and that's okay. But the more that we can come back to our window of tolerance is always the goal, because we want to feel as grounded and in our body as possible. So I want to thank you guys so much as always for tuning in to episode number 80, all about the window of tolerance. As mentioned last episode, I'm going to continue on this mental health train throughout the month of December, while also throwing in some other fun, exciting content. But I know that this time of year can be really, really stressful. So just a reminder to take a deep breath, notice your body, come back to your body, try to be in your window of tolerance. And I hope that you use some of these tools and that they're helpful for you to just feel safe and connected and grounded. So thank you guys so much as always. I look forward to chatting to you all next week. Bye, you guys. Thank you all so much for tuning into today's episode of Rewire to Inspire. I absolutely love connecting with you all, so make sure you're following me on Instagram. I am at JessieBrown13. If you enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to leave a review or share with someone you think would enjoy. I look forward to chatting with you all next episode. And remember, get out of your head and into your heart.